Hello and welcome back to D&D Beyond. I'm Amy Dallen, and I am very excited to welcome to the stream one of the coolest people on the internet. One of my heroes, not to put you on the spot here, but you're extremely cool, and I'm so glad that you could join me here on the stream. Please welcome Tanya DePass.
Hey, Amy. I'm just like a coolest person. Surely I'm in the wrong place. It's time to go.
I've been very excited to make this conversation happen because I have watched you roll some dice. I have rolled some dice with you, and it has been a consistent joy. For those of you who might not be familiar with Tanya DePass, aka Cipher of Tyr, you will know her from Rivals of Waterdeep, from Black Dice Society. If you are in video games, you probably already know some of her amazing work with I Need Diverse Games. Being behind I Need Diverse Games, and so much more. But today I asked you to join me and asked you what you might want to talk about, and I'm very excited for the topic that you picked because we're going to talk a little bit about how to start DMing or tips for new dungeon masters getting into D&D. And this is a constant question and something I will be happy to talk about forever, but I would love to hear first, Tanya, what is your advice for brand new dungeon masters who might be thinking about sitting on the other side of the screen for the very first time?
First and foremost, you don't need to memorize the player's handbook. You don't need to memorize the Dungeon Master's Guide. Because a lot of people talk about, I don't know every single rule in D&D. I don't know this crit table. I don't know the CR of these things I want to put in there. And also, you don't have to try and emulate the shows that you watch because every show is different. And your home game, whether or not you're streaming it, is your game. You don't need to try, and you should not try to be the next Black Dice Society, the next Crit Roll, the next whatever. Be your game. And as long as you sit down with your players and you communicate and have that trust, you're going to have a good time. The problems that come with GMing as a newer GM is, feeling like you need to know literally everything before you can ever GM, which isn't true. Or feeling like you have to homebrew everything. It is perfectly fine to take the adventure out of the book as written and run it for your first few games. Make some pre-gens, get some pre-gens. Get comfortable with being on the other side of the screen. And, have your D&D Beyond handy. Have a physical rulebook handy. It is perfectly fine to have to stop, especially if it's a home non-stream game, to go, let me just double check the CR on that. Let me double check the armor rating or something. No one should be judging you on that because you want to learn, your players want to have a good time. And also, this is important with any player or GM, is play with people you can have a good time with, that you can trust, that you can talk to. And also, I know when we started playing, there probably was no session 0. That wasn't a thing that existed. Have a session 0, not your character creation, but these are things that bother me. These are things that I'm not okay with. I have these phobias. I have whatever. And I'd like it if you did not put that in the game. And so there's a difference between session 0 and just character creation. Character creation, you're sitting there, you're making these characters, and think about, am I going to allow evil characters? Can these characters die? What level are they going to be? And just think about also, realistically, how many hours do you have to put toward creating your game, running your game, and debriefing after your game? So those are like some very condensed basics, but the biggest thing is you don't need to know every single rule in the book.
That's so important. That's so key. The Dungeon Master's Guide can be your best friend in learning, but it is not a quiz staring you in the face expecting you to know what's on page 254.
Yep.
How do you, as a DM, especially like when you're not on stream and it is a home game, how do you decide when are the right moments to just make a call and go with it, and when are the right moments to sort of stop and check on something?
Well, in the before times, we could sit at a table together, reading someone's body language, but now just kind of keeping an eye on your players in Zoom, using that backstage chat as it were. So DMs like in Zoom or in Discord or wherever you're playing, and just going, it's a level 5 campaign. It doesn't hurt anything if they kill this creature now. Or I always get the players that don't want to ever kill anything. They want to like negotiate with this like dire wolf, and now they've got a familiar, and I'm like, okay, it doesn't ruin anything for them to suddenly have this familiar, and it's fun. So, you know, the biggest thing is not to be precious about your story, because
Mm.
I can guarantee you, no matter if you've never DM'd, it's your first time, if you've been DMing for 20 years, your players and dice will betray you. They will throw any plan you have out the window within the first hour of playing.
And getting to the point where that becomes part of the fun for you as a DM is, I for me at least, was part of the magic, where I was like, oh no, I when I first started DMing, which has only been a couple of years now, but I would very much fall into the like, well, if it doesn't go this way, then I don't have a plan and they won't have a good time and they'll, resent me. And that was something for me that just had to come with doing it a few times
Mhm.
and trusting that like your players want to have a good time. They're not trying to wreck your stuff, and the thing that they have turned left into instead of where you expected could
Yep.
lead to the better story if you can practice rolling with it.
Yeah, and 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 I've been unfortunately in games where you could see the moment that like the player decision or that nat one totally derailed their like 30-page magnum opus you can't see behind the DM screen. But at the end of the day, you're having fun. You're supposed to anyway. But this is where communication and constantly checking with your players, and not in a stop after every roll, but in a, hey, we're taking a break, like let's order food, or I'm gonna step away for 5 minutes. If anybody wants anything, text me or DM me wherever you're playing the game, if it's virtual, or if you are lucky enough to still be able to play in person. If there's a room you can step into and go, hey, I noticed you seemed upset when this happened. Are you okay? Do you need a break? Do we need to retcon anything? Because at the end of the day, if you I think one thing people forget is that the GM is a player too.
Mm.
You are part of the story. You're crafting the story, but your NPCs, the things that you're doing, are part of the world that you're building with your players. And you're supposed to be having collaborative story time that's fun for everyone, including the DM. You're not
Yeah.
like God on high with like your DM screen and your 80 billion dice, and back here no one can ever see what you're doing. Because if you're not happy, and honestly, if you want to have a story where things happen just so, and these players and this character does this thing, and if they don't do this thing, and it throws your whole plan off, one, sit back and think about why that is, or just go write a novel. Because frankly, you have
Yeah.
total
World
control to
needs
write a
novels
novel.
too. And we know like many writers and creatives are born out of that environment, and I'm sure that there is a tension to sort of be like, oh, but it would be perfect if it goes this way. But I feel like for nearly all of us, at least who stick with RPGs, you fall in love with the unexpected twist. You fall in love with
Mm-hmm.
the way that it interacts with what you've set up to create something you couldn't have foreseen. And I do wonder
Yeah.
sometimes if the people like who've spent some time doing novels like want to come back and be like, I just wish I would honestly have no idea what's going to happen just once in a scene again. Maybe you need both.
Yeah. I mean, I'm friends with a lot of writers, and sometimes they're like, on occasion, the story just takes you where it wants to take you. You may have this great idea, and the words are like, nah, we're going this way. This is what's gonna happen. Just trust us.
Do you have any particular sort of tools that you use or that you recommend for folks starting out in with DMing? I know a major one for me was learning to make my notes shorter so that I was not trying to consult
Mm-hmm.
like 8 different pages. I was like, oh, I'm only going to be able to look at like maybe 2 pages while we're live, and I had to learn that over time. Um,
Well, for a stream story, because I was the DM for season 8 of Rivals, I would have just one sheet of beats I wanted to hit, because I know we have 2 hours. This is what happened last time. This is what I'd like to happen. And since we're such a short show and don't take a break, ideally at the beginning, after the recap, this is what happens. And then ideally by midpoint, this is where I'd like us to be. And in a really ideal world, this is where I'd like to end the episode. But again, the dice and the players don't always do that. So I've condensed down to one Google Doc that is open here, and then D&D Beyond with like any stat blocks I need, or the physical book if that's easier. Because as we know, sometimes it's easier just to flip to a page if you put a post-it note in there. And then, also just kind of check on the players. Don't spoil them, but go, here's the thing I like to do. Is this okay with you? Especially if you're going to do something where it's either coercive, it could get violent. And if you know your players and know XYZ isn't okay, or they've said, I can go to the line, but I can't cross it. It's like, okay, well, I want to have a scene, because for the whole season IDM, the rivals were in prison. They never got out until the last episode. Bless their hearts. And I was like, well, you're in prison and people don't like you. There could be a fight. Are you okay with a little violence? And they're like, sure. And I'm like, why did I ask? It's you.
But those are great instincts to sort of look around at the situation you're in, test your knowledge of the players, figure out what's going to work or not work. And I love that you mentioned that, because for folks who aren't used to doing checking and safety tools, it can sound like that's only a recipe for no's. And while it's very important that it's a recipe for no's, it's equally important that it lets you know what is going to be fine, that everyone can have a good time with. Let's see. We are going to come back to that. I'm very curious, just because Rivals, congratulations, by the way, on 100 episodes of streamed tabletop role-playing games.
It was a lot. It's about 3 years. Yeah, because we premiered June 1st, June 2nd, 2018 at Stream Many Eyes.
I don't want to sound like a hipster, but I was there and it was amazing, and immediately fell in love with the show and the players, and like everyone should please check out Rivals. But you also have this wonderful and somewhat unusual, especially for a streaming show, structure of sharing the DMing duties, which is so cool. Can you talk briefly about what that's been like, if you would recommend it for home games, or what you might have learned from doing that?
It's interesting because, it gives everyone an opportunity to kind of tell their own story. I think of the cast members present, Sharif is DM the most, like 2 seasons back to back. And it's interesting because, for someone who may not want to feel like, if I DM this stream show every Sunday for however long our show is on, I'm now stuck always doing all the work. Because it can be, it is a lot of work. I'm not going to say it can be. It is a lot of work to prep and run the show and everything else. But it also gives all of us a chance to kind of see what it's like as the DM and understand. It's hard because I don't want to get all mushy and start crying because I put on makeup. But B, I think a lot of people don't understand that our never DMs don't understand that there's also an emotional toll when you're the DM, especially like if a character dies, if a character's hurt. What do you do in our case when someone decides to leave the show? How do you gracefully exit that character? And it's worked because it's given everyone a chance to see both sides of the table. And our next season, we're going to do co-DMs. Eugenio Vargas is an experienced DM. Brian Gray, who plays Virgil, has never DM'd before. And he hadn't played D&D in like 20, 25 years before he came back to Rivals. So he's going to be our new DM, and Eugenio's going to be our experienced DM, and together they're going to make it work. So it's fun, and I think,
just regular D&D Beyond watchers will remember Brian from our Pride Roundtable a couple of months ago. Was a delightful presence. So just call back there. Go check that out and get excited for the next season. All right, please continue.
Oh, that's okay. Yes, because Brian has been doing a bunch of one-shots in the break between seasons. And, it just, for me, it made me have a greater appreciation as well. Like, I already knew what it was like to DM, but there's a difference between DMing at your home game and DMing when people are watching you, hundreds, thousands, whatever. So I know we'll eventually get to that, but it's a mind shift between, we're casual, we're sitting here like you and I are on Zoom, and all these people are not watching us right now. We've got beer and we're chilling, versus I have 3 hours to make this story go, and we're live right now.
So definitely, we can, and hopefully will have many more opportunities to talk about that side of it. But we do have some great questions coming in. I love this one. A question from V2 Blast. How do you handle it when some of the party wants one thing and the rest of the party wants another? For example, some want combat, some want RP, or even just that some want to do quest A while others want to do quest B.
Hmm. That's interesting because it came up a little bit with Rivals, as in the season idea. I mean, it comes up on occasion. I would say find your balance because, and this is any game, any stream that's all RP and no action, that can be great. But at some point, you're going to run across something you got to fight. And, how are you doing XP? Are you giving experience? Are you granting XP because of great roleplay moments? And also, at least for me, and this is just me, all combat is so grindy, and to me it'd be boring to watch. And also, as we know, combat takes 20 years, so combat could stretch across like 4 episodes if you're not careful. But I would actually take a break and go, okay, some of you want to fight things, some of you want to really focus on RP, and if you get to that point in your campaign, I'd say, stop, take a break. Obviously not on a stream game, but chat about it and go, okay, we're at session 10, and some of you want more combat, some of you want to have more player to player experiences. Can we find a middle ground of, like, the next time you get set on an adventure, I promise that you'll run into things you can fight, but between departing your location and getting to the combat, there'll be downtime / time to interact and have those RP moments. But that's something you should actually discuss in your session 0 of what is it you want out of this campaign. Are you people that like to dungeon crawl, or do you want to have more of a narrative experience? And, or are you fine with like a 60-40, 70-30 split? And, if we go so far, like we go 5 sessions with no combat, are you going to be mad and quit the game? And I would just tell people, be honest. What is it that you want? Because if you just want to dungeon crawl and hit things, there's many video games that will fill that void for you.
And there may be a table that's equally interested in that side of
Yeah.
it. But I love what you've said about, like, sort of stopping, especially if you're already in the middle of something, sort of stopping to be like, all right, so we are going to be doing this, but there'll be time along the way for this. That lets everybody know where to look for their opportunities. And that will help people, even if everybody vaguely knows they need to compromise, but they're not sure how, that can help them to sort of locate those chances.
Yeah, and actually,
another great one.
shout out. Oh, before you do
No.
that, shout out to B. Dave Walters, who actually does that with Black Guy Society. In our pre-show, he's like, "Hey, this one is going to be more combat-y. Have your spells ready. Know what you've learned, and this is going to be like your one downtime for the next like 4 episodes. At least the way I've got things planned. Like, and there's that uptick of who knows what'll happen, but that's my hope."
I love that because it doesn't spoil the game to sort of be like, hey, today's a good day to remember what your spells are, Vein Dragon asks, what do you do when they kill the big bad evil guy at first introduction?
I don't know. I've never had that happen. I would have another big bad. Like, that's not really the person you were looking for. Like, haha, and like the real villain jumps out or something. I don't know.
Yeah. That's a great opportunity for the just kidding, it was his evil twin.
Or, haha, you thought you got the big bad, but really you must go through this portal to wherever, and you've got 20 sessions ahead of you before you find the real villain. But I would also sit back and think about pacing, because I've never had a session go so quickly, unless it was a one-shot or stream one-shot, where we did have, the idea was to go find the big bad. But if it's a home game and you're hitting the big bad in session 1, I would sit back and think about my pacing, unless you're sitting there playing for 12 hours, and this is your only chance to play together for like the next 6 months.
That's great advice. Making sure that the game that you're imagining fits into the space, and if it surprises you in that way, it's worth thinking about what you were envisioning there. Let's see. Tadwin says, question regarding virtual games. What do you recommend for your setup? Do you have any sort of, and this kind of gets into talking a little bit about streaming RPGs. Is there any like big thing that you've learned?
The biggest thing is have a good microphone, because even if you don't do if you don't do video, because not everybody wants to be on video, surprise, surprise. Or if you're doing it in Discord and you've agreed no video, the main thing is have a good microphone, have a good internet connection, and agree early on what your system of choice is going to be and how you're going to do that. Are you going to discuss this? Are you going to have a section of a Discord or a Zoom or whatever? Like, how will you communicate if it's a one-off, if it's multiple sessions? And again, always communicate and check in both as you're getting ready to play, and then after the end, especially if something's super emotional, or if a character dies or something like that happens.
So let's talk about that a little bit. We've been talking a bit on the channel about different safety tools in Session Zero. What is your advice for an effective Session Zero, or like favorite safety tools you've used?
Favorite safety tools are, oh wow, I totally blanked on the name of it, but it's the X card. And since we're mostly digital, thanks to the state of the world, I just tell people put a big capital X in Zoom chat if something is a thing, or in Discord or wherever we're chatting. And then also the RPG safety checklist, and whether it's a one shot, whether it's an ongoing game, um, like the Jasper's game day I just did. And even though it was a one shot and it was charity, we still did that checklist. So without the players knowing what I was going to run from, it's like, I just need to be cognizant of what's okay, because for 3 hours we're together. So that tool, and then just mainly email and talking, having a Session Zero where we get on a Zoom call, we do voice. And I don't know if that came up, but someone did ask about streaming a Session Zero. I would say if everyone's comfortable with it, then yes, we did that for the game I'm writing, and we've done that for other games. I think we did a 0.5 for Black Dice. We didn't do our character creation, but I think kind of setting your expectations, especially for stream shows, because it normalizes it. Now, people may want to bring up things that they're not comfortable having set on stream. So if everyone is okay with that, I'd say absolutely stream it, because one, it normalizes these discussions to see other people doing it. And two, I feel like a lot of people get not weird, I don't know the best way to phrase it, but they feel like, and this is me being me and being a little bit of a grump, I've seen the pushback on Session Zero of, well, back in my day, we didn't have to do such a thing. It's like, well, back in your day, you also had chainmail bikinis, and the dragon steals the girl, and that was your quest. Things improve and they move on. But for me, for instance, I've never played a game of Gen Con, and I will probably never play a game of Gen Con because I don't know who I'm sitting with. There is no opportunity for Session Zero. And a convention game is a whole different animal that we're not talking about today, but that's one of the things where I can sit down with you, and our friends, and say, okay, let's play a home game. We're going to play D&D. We're going to do something out of the book, very light and casual. But I would still know, even though I know you, Amy, I don't know what could be a trigger for you, an issue for you. And when I say trigger, audience, I mean the literal definition of a trigger, not oh, lol, you're triggered, because there is a psychological definition of it. So, like, I am arachnophobic. If someone goes on and on in very vivid detail about spiders, that could be a trigger for me, for instance. Or, if someone was, content warning, if someone had been assaulted or something like that, and those male DMs that like to keep doing this to female players of, look, an assault line with your character that no one consented to, and things like that. So those are the things that you should do in a Session Zero. And if people are fine with it to a point, but there are just certain things they don't want to bring up during the stream part of it, discuss that before. That's a line, and then the other things they are comfortable discussing in front of an audience, that's what you do.
I love that. The way that the RPG community and the games themselves have evolved over time, it is precisely because many of us have been playing for many decades. Like, I've been playing since the 90s, and I sure wish we'd had some better safety tools around for some of those early games. We didn't know what we were doing, and people's feelings got hurt.
That emotional
I don't mean to be that. We have memories to fall back on. But the good news is many smart and empathetic people have spent a bunch of time thinking about this. And now it's all easier than it used to be. And I love that very much. We have some more great questions coming in from chat. That's okay. Here's me catching up with the should you stream your Session Zero. I would say talk to your group about that. I don't know if I'd be comfortable with that, but I love your argument. Hadn't occurred to me that to normalize that in public, and it's intriguing. Let's see. Dark of Nate has a great, especially for a new DM question. We've done specialty things on this before, but if you're just starting out, any tips for running one shots? How much or how little planning is enough for a short story? Like, How many encounters do you think about, or NPCs do you prep?
I would say base it on how long you're planning to play. Ideally, so this is where we get into the stream versus home thing again. If you're going to be at home and you're at a table and you've got like all your whole Saturdays cleared to play, give people a few encounters. Make sure you take a break to eat and everything else. But if you're doing a stream session, find an already short adventure and even streamline it a little more, or just kind of know, okay, well, the players are never going to get to their objective if they keep doing things the adventure says. So I've done that with like Avernus stuff that I've done, or my homebrew of the Terrible Goose. It really should be like a couple sessions, at least like 3 to 4 hours of a session. But if we're doing it for one shot, we're doing it for fun and silliness, we have 3 to 4 hours. Like, okay, we're just cutting out the whole part where you run into Mad Maggie and you just now have found this fort you need to find. Somehow someone has told you where the fort is and you are there. Because the whole section with finding Mad Maggie and bargaining to get a war machine, that could take up a good part of the game depending on how people play. So think about how much time you have. Is it streamed, non-streamed? And do you have time and do you want to if the one shot turns into a 2-shot? Because like you may get to the end of your time together and go, but we didn't finish. You didn't get to the end of the quest. And if people are like, but cool, we can play more, then you know that it takes X hours to get so far in this adventure.
I love that. Let's see. Oh, interesting. A couple squids has just a variation on the like. I don't know if you have a set answer to this one, but question: we're mostly playing on the internet these days, and there are lots of resources to find games with random people online, including shameless plug the D&D Beyond Discord. Yay! What are some good ways for a DM who is in those situations to build cohesion and buy-in with players who don't know each other?
I would say if you're in something like the D&D Beyond Discord, which I am, so hello, just throw out if there's an LFG group, or if you're in a Discord that has an LFG group, just lay it on the table of, I want to run Curse of Strahd, and I'm looking for players at least this age, must be okay with horror. I'm say where you're at, because in a Discord you can't assume we're all in the US or even the same time zone, and just go, here's what I'm looking to do. Are you and then create a subgroup or create like a group chat elsewhere and go, okay, we've got our players. Let's get to know each other a little bit. And let's also plan our session 0. And that way you're chatting, you're interacting, and don't be afraid to go and see how people interact in the Discord. Because if they're that person always comes in with jokes, and by jokes, I'm being incredibly sarcastic, see how they interact before you invite them to your table, your virtual table. Because the way someone acts in a Discord or a public space or on Twitter is probably going to be how they are at your virtual table. And don't be afraid to tell people, I've seen how you interact in the space. I don't want to play with you. And people may not like it, but I'd rather have someone say, well, I saw you make like 2 or 3 off-color jokes. That's not what I want at my table. And be okay with saying that. So watch how people interact. And then if you see someone you really like how they are, you like what they're talking about, you kind of align on like maybe your fan theories about your favorite show, and you go, oh, I want to run this thing, and they seem to like this thing, say, hey, can I send you a message? I'm trying to put together a game. Is that cool? Reach out, because we can't read minds. And, I probably would have never got to meet Amy if I'd not said, hey, I'm going to be in town. I want you to say hi.
And it was very cool. Yay for that was not a con, but con friends. And that's how we're all. I'm just gonna take this on myself. We're all nerds. For our depending on which words everybody prefers for themselves. And many of us have experience with it feeling awkward to do things that feel personally risky, like reach out to strangers to talk about games. Trust that everyone is going through some version of that experience. Everyone is, no one is hoping this next table's a bad time. But we all also know that not every table is right for everyone, and we have to sort of get through that figuring out process. And on the other side of it is the right tables, hopefully, and some very satisfying games. Once you're in that game, how do you get your players to bond?
That's when you like just like if we met up at a pub in person, just go, here's the adventure I want to run. What do you think of it? Ask people what they like to do. What do you do when you're not playing D&D? What if you're comfortable, like, do you have a day job? What's your day job? How'd you get into D&D? And not the resume that people like to give of I've been playing since the dinosaurs roamed the earth and I hand bound my red book back in the day with the guts of the animal I slew. Not that kind of resume, but in the I got into D&D because blah. And
Mm-hmm.
this is I'm going to be that person. I'm just going to say it. If someone is at your table and you start talking to someone, they got into D&D because they watched a show or they watched someone stream it, they are just as valid as a fan as anyone who's been playing since, TSR rolled off the first book, They are just as valid and belong in the community, and D&D is for everyone. Because fun fact, I stopped playing D&D for several years because of people telling me I didn't belong. And then I came back because of 5th edition.
And I'm so glad. And
Yes, blame Tito.
that's so good. Greg Tito, of course, of Wizards, who is responsible for getting many, many people into and back into Dungeons and Dragons, and also who I love because just like big theater kid energy as a
Mm.
human. And I just personally appreciate that. But let's see. Let's see. What haven't we covered that you would want to make sure that a brand new DM is armed with as they're sitting down at the table for the first time?
Last thing is you do not need to go out and spend the earth on like minis and 8 cameras if you're gonna stream it. You can have some dice. You can have your PHB and your DM's guide or D&D Beyond open and buy like a couple sets of dice and you're fine. You do not need to go out and spend the earth to prove that you're a real D&D player because
Also,
most
obligatory
people
plug: you can roll digital dice on D&D Beyond. Not that it will stop you from getting physical dice, because we love our dice very much, but you can do
I'm
both.
I'm going to take a photo of my desk and send it to you when we're done because now my desk is literally covered in dice.
But it makes the burden even less that you don't, even before
Mm.
you have bought your first dice, you can already be rolling them and practicing your DMing is the only reason I pop that one
Yep.
in there. Uh, Have you learned anything from watching other folks be first time DMs that you would want to make sure, other than what I learned when I was doing this with a lot of first timers, which is that we really can, like, please try it. Everyone try it. It's so much more fun than you're expecting. It is hard and a lot of work, but it's so rewarding.
Sitting at the table in Rivals because, until the Panini happened, we met physically in a studio every week. Sharif had never DM'd before he DM'd the show. And just watching him, one, get really into it, but also curse him forever in his puzzles, just get into weaving this story every week and watching that little diabolical glee when we either didn't figure out his puzzles or when we got it and he was like, look, you did it, like a proud parent. But also, it reminded me, and like, it's one of the things, but you need the reminder on occasion of, one, it's supposed to be fun, and two, you're collaborating, you are not railroading. And that's the biggest thing I took from it. And it was just a reminder because I hadn't DM'd in a while once we got to do Rivals. So me coming into the DM chair, at least for D&D, the chair was a little dusty, shall we say.
But we're all so glad that you did, and I'm so glad you could join me today. Where can people find you and follow your shows and learn more about what you do?
Oh goodness, there's so much. Well, Rivals is on break after 10 seasons. We will be back. We're announcing the date soon. Let's see, what am I doing? I will be at Gen Con, so if you'll be at Gen Con, say hi, be nice, wear your mask, wash your hands. I'll be at PAX West. I'm doing a panel. That's Saturday at PAX West, so I'll be in Seattle, say hi. But this week, today's Tuesday, tomorrow on my channel, the RPG I'm making, we have our second episode of season 3. Come by, hang out, and then Thursday on D&D's official channels, the Black Dice Society reconvenes where I play Fen, a draw dump here blood hunter, with a little bit of the beast in her. And then on Sundays over on the I Need Diverse Games channel, we started a new campaign called Dungeons and Do-Rags, which is players of every experience. Critical Bard is our DM, and Milady Confetti, who is a great cosplayer, a great person, wanted to play in a game, and she'd never got a chance to play in a game before. Got her very first dice this year, everything else. And so it's a mix of new and old players, and we do that 1:30 Pacific on Sundays, which is 3:30 for me.
Fantastic! Thank you so much for being here, for sharing some of your amazing experience and tips and advice with us. We hope to have you back again in future. That's a leading prompt. And
all you have to do is ask.
Thank you so much, and we will see you next time on D&D Beyond.
D&D!